Thank you, Amy and Brittany, for having us here today to present this program. I do want to mention that there is a handout that goes along with this program. So if you don't really need to take notes, you can just listen to the information, and you'll have something that we can easily email to all of you after the program. And the program that we're going to look at today, I'm going to start actually sharing my screen right now, is called Effective Communication. And it is not here on my desk right now, so that's really crazy. So let me stop sharing. Let me make sure I can get that up for us. Let's see here. Now I'm going to try to share again. Always fun with Zoom. Is that showing now, Amy?
Yes, it is.
Great, wonderful. This program is one of my favorite. We have many programs, more than half a dozen easily, programs about understanding Alzheimer's and how to support people, caregivers, people that are experiencing directly having cognitive decline. And this program really has some practical hands-on techniques. You'll walk away, I think, today feeling like you have a few ideas around the ways that you can continue to communicate as things evolve through this progressive disease that Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia are as well. So we're going to jump right into this. Do put your questions in there. We will have plenty of opportunity to talk about what your concerns might be. The objectives of this particular program is to explain how communication changes throughout the course of the disease. So as the disease progresses, how you are able to connect with the person that you're caring for or working with will also change. You have to become somewhat of a good decoder. There are verbal and nonverbal messages to communication, and a person living with dementia may respond in different ways. So we are going to look at how you become better at discerning what that communication is, and also identify strategies, as I said, so that you can connect and communicate through each stage of the disease. So we're going to just look broadly here at what is communication. Typically, we think of communication as using our words, or maybe we write something. But really, there are so many other ways in which we can and do communicate. And one of the things that becomes so important in communicating with someone who has cognitive decline is understanding the impact of our nonverbal kinds of communication, our body language, our tone of voice, how we're making eye contact, so our facial expressions, etc. So we're going to really focus a lot around those kinds of ways in which we can communicate. Now, we do know that the Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease, so we have different stages. The early stage, which sometimes is referred to as the mild stage, people in that stage can still convey many of their thoughts and feelings using language the way we typically do. They may start to be able to have some challenges around their thought process, but they're still able to make decisions. And this is such a critical time to take advantage of, because you can communicate with that individual and they can help give you thoughts about how they want to be cared for, or the kinds of things that they need. They may be beginning to misinterpret what other people say, but that early stage is a really critical time to take advantage of. In the middle stage, also known as the moderate stage, people begin to use more basic words and sentences. So things start to diminish around the verbal communication. At that point, they begin to rely more on your tone of voice, facial expression, body language, etc. What's really important is this third point. The individual throughout all of this continues to need emotional connection and meaningful activity. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means and how that can look, but it's so important to remember that throughout, even when a person is no longer really communicating with words at all, they're still needing and aware of the people around them and need that emotional connection. In the late stage, also known as severe, people may still respond to familiar words, phrases, or songs, and we'll talk more about songs and the power of music in a little while. But they will be, at that point, really relying on body language and using the other senses, and we're going to talk about how you can utilize all of the senses to continue to communicate even during those late stages. So we're going to go through each of the stages and we're going to talk about specifically what kinds of things you might find as you try to communicate throughout. In that early stage, a person will be finding it harder to get those right words. The example I like to use is they may point to their watch and say, this time thing. They may know that it's still connected to time, but forget the actual word. They may be taking longer to speak or respond. I like to use the metaphor of sort of an older computer with a slower processor. It's still in there, but it's taking a longer time to retrieve that information. So it makes sense to allow for that and to give time to the communication. A person may also start to withdraw from conversation. You can imagine how bewildering it is when you feel like you're not able to really keep up or think about things or remember names or remember objects. So you pull back because you're not feeling confident. So we start to see some personality changes often. And although we often think of Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia as really focused on memory loss, there are also other aspects to the impact, which are around executive functioning skills like making decisions and problem solving. So it isn't just a memory type of impact. It hits in other areas as well. We have a number of videos throughout. Here is our first one.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool, so you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with the word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
That's such an important point, and that might change. So a person at the very beginning may say, give me the space and time to get there. Let me work it out.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with
eventually that might change. So you need to keep checking in. This is something that's changing and evolving. So what's working in the early stage may need to be adapted as things progress. In terms of communication in that early stage, we just talked about how you can ask directly how to help. What are the ways in which I can be supportive and helpful to you? You want to keep your sentences clear and straightforward, giving plenty of time for those conversations, even just keeping your speed of communication slower, but also just allowing for the time to get that communication going back and forth. And include that person in the conversations that affect him or her, including planning for the future. Sometimes, and particularly as things progress, we tend to lapse and talk about the person as if they're not really still part of the interaction. Really important to try to remember that they are still very much there and keep including them to the degree that they can and you can. Things to keep in mind during that early stage: try to avoid making assumptions about what is or isn't working or what is the person thinking or not thinking. Speak and focus directly to that person. Communicate in the way that's most comfortable for that person. So different people, everybody has different preferences. Somebody may say, write things down, email me, call me, talk to me, sit there and speak with me directly if you can. We now have Zoom in ways that even if you're not living with someone, you can have a face-to-face communication. So you want to be able to figure out what's the best way that's going to work during that early stage. This next point might surprise you, the idea of laughing together, but it is so important. Of course, this is a heavy and hard road to go down, but to the extent that you can find the moments where you can bring some levity, enjoy things together still, laugh together, such an important part of keeping that communication and connection going. And then just being honest and staying connected, honest about how challenging it is. some of the challenges that you're experiencing as a care partner, for that person to be able to talk about what they're experiencing. It's hard. These conversations are hard, but so important to have. Now to go to the middle stage and look a little bit deeper at that. During that stage, the things you might notice: increased difficulty finding those right words. So some of these things are just going to continue to get more challenging. They may begin to use familiar words repeatedly. We all know that repetition is somewhat of a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. And this is very, very common and can be very challenging to have somebody repeating something. One of the messages that we really like to encourage all the people that take our workshops, our programs, is to be patient with yourself. This is challenging, and it's challenging on both sides. And although we try to be patient, it can be sometimes hard, and we need to get support. It's important to talk to other people. We'll make sure you're aware of all of our resources. There are support groups you can participate in, but that repetition piece can be very challenging. A person may also begin to invent new words to describe familiar things. They can easily lose a train of thought. We talked already before about that withdrawal, speaking less frequently. And then the behavior becomes more of what we start to notice and try to understand. So they may be communicating more through their behavior than using words. Typically, throughout all of these stages, things don't usually happen in a rapid or sudden manner. The change doesn't accelerate quickly. So if you do see something that's very significant in a very short time, that would be very important to check out with a medical professional, because there may be something else at play. Everybody progresses at a different rate through all of these stages that we're generalizing here about today, but typically it is not a sudden type of change. We'll hear more. Oh, where did my video go? Let's try this again.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick. It's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them in their process.
I couldn't agree more about the taking time, and I would actually up the number from 3 to 10. I think it's really important to take a breath and figure out how to respond, and to realize that it is on you really to try to have that appropriate and supportive response. And that's not always easy to achieve.
I would.
So again, we're still in the middle stage talking about how to connect. You want to always be able to approach the person gently with empathy, approach from the front. You might need to identify who you are and call the person by their name. Even if you're a familiar person. My father had Alzheimer's disease. He did forget my name. He didn't forget that I was somebody close and important, but he did forget my name. And I would always identify myself by name with him when we reached that stage. Important to maintain eye contact. Get at that same level. If the person is reclining, you want to get down there where you're at that same level. This next bullet is challenging as well, to avoid criticizing, correcting, and arguing. Particularly early in middle stage, we are still feeling some denial often, and we are challenging that person. We believe that they can remember that, or they do know where to put the milk away, that these things become challenging for us. So we often are criticizing or correcting, etc. If you can try to realize that the person really has no control over this and try to minimize that it is going to help both of you connect and communicate better. Again, in the same vein, pay attention to your tone. You can feel irritable or stressed. This can be so stressful. So really important to try to be aware of your tone, get a break, get into another room and vent a little bit, or call someone, or get together with a friend, but do something to allow yourself to get space so that you can pay attention to these things and take your time. Give yourself the time that you need.
She could sense my frustration because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, you know, she was very old school and she's like, don't disrespect me. And I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question. So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
Like when she references phase 2 of her relationship. So really, as the phases move along in
She could
this,
sense my
in the
frustration.
disease, your communication enters a different phase as well. And so you have to evolve as the disease evolves. So in that middle stage, how do you connect? Keep things slow and basic. You're going to use short sentences and basic words, speaking slowly and clearly, one person and one question at a time, limiting distractions. So all of these things, I think about how we live in such a busy world where there are often so many things happening in the same space. You can have a television on, a conversation going on among other people. There can be so many things happening at the same time. So if you can minimize those distractions and try to keep a peaceful and sort of calmer environment, that can be very, very helpful. Being patient, again, with yourself and with the person that you're caring for. And then offer a guess or fill in words if it's acceptable. So if a person is struggling and they'll allow for it, you can try to offer and see if you can help them communicate what they're trying to communicate. Also, in the middle stage, it's helpful to have different cues. We now know that in memory care centers that are really evolving over the last really just 5 to 10 years, they utilize a lot of these kinds of visual cues. And you can do that in the home environment as well. You can have signs. You can have, make sure that the things are labeled, a bathroom, a closet, the kitchen. You can try to avoid sudden upsetting kinds of movements. I think that the general thing is that it's your goal to try to make that person feel safe, cared for, and comfortable. So you want to do things that create an environment that enhances that. You can write things down if the person is able to, and we can refer to a list of things, reminders or things of that sort. You can put answers into your questions. An example of that would be, rather than saying, what would you like for lunch today, which is a big, wide open kind of question, can be very intimidating. People often have trouble with menus and things during this stage. You can just say, it's lunchtime, I'm making sandwiches, can I give you turkey or tuna? Just make it very, very, very simple. Repeat as you need to. And then try to turn negatives into positives. So an example of that might be a person says to you, I want to see my mom today. And you know they can't see their mom today because their mom has been deceased for some time. Rather than reminding them of that, you might say, you know, let's look at pictures of your mom. Let's tell our favorite memories of your mom. You can just try to spin it around to make something make it not sad. Try to make it pleasant and spin it around. Avoiding quizzing, that can be an interesting piece as well, because often we very much want to know what's happened. Did you take your medication today? Did someone come by and help you do this? And we're riddling somebody with questions. Better to try to find out the answer to those questions elsewhere, because chances are that person can't give you the answers that you're looking for. This also in the middle stage and throughout is the idea of connecting, always being empathic and reassuring the person. This first bullet, join the person's reality, this is a really important paradigm in terms of how to interact with people that have cognitive decline. This has really been something that's been evolving also over the last decade or so. I think in the earlier on, before people would try to correct, or our natural instinct really is to try to correct. So if someone says it's summertime and you know that it's wintertime, you might say, no, of course it's not summertime. What we now know is that it's really helpful to try to join in that person's reality and to avoid the sort of correction argumentative aspect. And a person may have a lot of unusual ideas of what might be happening. It may be a mixture of fantasy, some place in reality, some book they've read, a film they've seen. There can be a lot of different things that come out of that person. And just try to go with the flow as long as the person is safe and there is no harm. Provide reassurance that you hear and understand that person. Even if you don't really understand, try to convey that they are understood. Focus on the feelings, not the facts. So in the example that I gave about a person expressing the desire to see their mom, you may not focus necessarily on the fact that that can't happen, but really the feeling behind that is that they're missing their mom. And what can you do to try to connect them to that person and to her memory? Validate the person and redirect if necessary. So you might say, I understand that you're missing your mom, and then try to redirect. But the validation is important. Now I'm going to look a little more now at the late stage. Of course, things get more and more challenging as you move along. So in that late stage, you may notice that communication is reduced to very few words, if it could be no words, and maybe some sounds. It's possible that there might be some response to familiar words or phrases. Sometimes it's hard to tell. We don't even really know. At that time, what you want to do is listen for, of course, any expressions of pain and respond promptly. A person is not really able at that stage to articulate what might be happening physically to them. So you need to be aware and look to see, notice any kind of thing on the person or look for any expressions of pain. Your goal is to help the person, again, feel safe and happy. You want to continue to bring respect to each of the conversations that you have. Important that you keep talking, even if they're not talking. The sound of your voice can be very comforting, and it's important that you don't just shut down as well, but you stay engaged. The last bullet, which is hard for me to see on my screen, I'm not sure if you can, says use all the 5 senses to communicate. And that's where we're going to shift to start to look at how we can do that and what that means. A little video first.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. My husband noted to me recently, he said, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
So that's a new way of their connecting in this stage, using the
I know
sense
that my
of
mom
touch.
feels aggravated.
And then there are other ways to use touch. You can do things with different fabrics. You can identify shapes by touch, giving lotion hand massages. There was a woman in the York, Maine area, the southern Maine area, a number of years ago before COVID. And that's what she would do, was go around to different long-term care facilities and give individuals hand massages. That was her way of volunteering and helping folks in that situation. You can do things like identify everyday items in a bag by touch. Visiting with animals. Animals are very healing and can be a wonderful way of connecting. You can do sculpting using Play-Doh or non-toxic material, clay, or just simply holding a person's hand, stroking his or her arm or back. These are numbers of ways in which you can connect using the sense of touch. Also, the sense of sight. There are so many different ways you can do this with colored pictures, watching videos, looking at photo albums, looking at books of famous paintings or favorite people or settings, going outdoors, going bird watching, visiting an aquarium, painting using watercolors, or just simply being outdoors and sitting by an open window. So there are so many ways in which we can use our vision to connect and to experience some shared time with that person. Sound. This is a huge one. Listening to familiar music. There's been well-established studies, and it's more than studies, it's ongoing, that music is a very, very powerful connector. We all know ourselves that we can remember the lyrics to a song that we haven't heard for 40 years and be a little vague about the conversation we had with somebody yesterday. So music and lyrics live in a different part of our brain, and oftentimes people who have cognitive decline still have a connection and powerful memory jar through music. It can be such a positive thing. There's something called music and memory, where they engage people with cognitive decline using music, and you can do this on your own. And also, not just as a separate activity, you can also incorporate music into some of the harder challenges. For example, people often who have Alzheimer's will resist taking a shower or a bath. So bring music into the bathroom, and it might help calm that person and get them to be more agreeable to doing something that they don't want to do. You can listen to recordings, nature, farms, city animal sounds, musical instruments, of course, songs or speech in the person's native language. This is a very interesting point. Often people, not often, it happens that people will start to speak in a language as their dementia advances that they knew perhaps as a child, even a language that you might not have known they even knew. And they will start to speak in this language because usually it's the things that happened longer ago that are remembered more easily than the things more recently. So it is not a surprise if somebody does do this. So then you would want to use that language, listen to music in that language, or listen to books in that language. So again, there are a lot of audiobooks. You can read a book to a person. There are audiobooks for a person to listen to. It can be poetry, scripture, newspaper articles. Everything is available now to be listened to. And often it's just hearing the gentle tone of your voice that can be very, very comforting. So sound is very, very important. Also the sense of smell. Pleasant smells, using you can have in bags different things to smell: herbs, spices, essential oils, grass clippings, flowers, teas or coffees, fragrant hand lotions, or food, of course. We know that food can be a very comforting association for people. It can remind them of holidays and favorite foods and pleasant times. So the sense of smell can be a powerful connector. And then, of course, through taste, with favorite foods, home-baked foods, popsicles, ice creams, whatever that might be. I read an article some time ago now from a long-term care facility somewhere in the state of New York. And the title of the article was "Let Them Eat Chocolate." And it was about how in these late stages, particularly, if that's what a person is wanting, and that's going to bring them some pleasure at that stage of their life, not that we should abandon all nutrition and have a full diet of chocolate, but if a person wants a piece of chocolate and it's morning, maybe that's okay at that point in time. So I think it was the message around that was that we can let go a little bit around some of our typical structures and allow for someone to have the pleasure of having the food that they might want most at that point in their life. Throughout all of the stages, there are some common things that apply. So just to recap and look in the bigger picture, Joining the person's reality to connect. This is such an important piece. Understanding and accepting what you can and cannot change. There are a lot of things about this that are out of our control. The trajectory of the disease is going to progress in the way that it's going to progress. What you can control are some of these environmental kinds of things we're talking about, using some of these different strategies to communicate, and of course, working on your own interaction with that individual, which means taking care of yourself. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Remembering that the person retains a sense of self despite the losses. This disease represents loss after loss, but that person is still there. And it's really important to remember and honor that. It's demonstrating respect and connecting through feelings, always treating the person as the adult that he or she is, which can be very hard. This is harsh, but I once described my father as a toddler with a driver's license because that's how he was behaving and he was still driving. It was very frightening for all of us. But really, it was important for all of us to remember that he wasn't a 2-year-old toddler. He was a grown adult man, and we need to always respect and be aware of that. We need to try to decode the person's communication. That becomes our challenge, to try to figure out how and what they're trying to communicate. Recognizing the effects that our own mood and actions have on the interaction, on the communication. Try to get to understand the source of the reactions. Is there something happening? Is there some physical pain? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is there something upsetting happening that's creating some agitation? And help meet the needs of that person while soothing and calming. You become the sort of calmer in chief, really. That's part of what we need to do.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
We really cannot stress that enough, how really important self-care is in all of this. And so I want to just spend a little moment on this page before we stop and see if there are any questions. Around support and self-care, it's important to be aware of all of the resources that you have, and some of those are family, friends, etc. And also the Alzheimer's Association has a tremendous amount of resource and support to offer. We have our helpline, which is 24/7. All of the services, including the helpline, are free that the Alzheimer's Association has to offer. But the helpline is available around the clock, 365 days a year. These people that answer the call are specialists at a master's level clinician level, and they are able to offer you support and information on a whole plethora of things. So it can be an immediate issue that you're worried about something that's happening at that very moment, or it could, and you just need someone to talk to and get a little support, or it can be much more long-ranging around where can I find a good elder care attorney, or what are my resources locally for support groups or respite care. So it can be really anything along the range of help that you might need. There is bilingual staff and translation service in many, many languages. There's a live chat service available, and then the TTY service as well. So that's all happens on our helpline. We have many education programs, such as the one that you're currently watching right now. Our website, alzheimers.org/education, can get you there. These are some of the many programs that we offer. We're doing the effective communication strategies today, but we have several other. We have already offered one, and we will be offering a few more to all of you. So be aware that you can get on there and you can see these, you can get the information, you can see recorded versions of many of these programs as well. We have our community resource finder on our website as well that will help you find out what types of events community services are going on, different programs that we're having, how to access care for home, some how to get medical professional support that you need, different housing options. So this is a really valuable tool as well. We have something called ALZ Connected, which is how you can connect with other people that are affected by the disease. There are caregivers forums for people who are providing support. And then there are also forums for people in the earlier stages of the disease that want to talk about what they're going through with other people. This is a resource for caregivers, family members, friends, individuals who have lost someone, and people living with the disease. And then we also have Alzheimer's Navigator, which helps you create some personal action plans, working with your doctor, understanding symptoms, safety concerns, legal planning, financial planning, the issue of driving, which is a huge one that often people deal with fairly early on, how to get support, how to deal with some daily living challenges, different care options. So all of that is on our website as well. And that is the material of this program. And as I said, we'll be able to send you a email, which I can forward along to Brittany, and she can send to all of you. But I'm happy to take questions if people have any kind of question. I know your camera's off. You can put it in the chat, or you can just speak if you have a question, or something you want to share with the others as well. Oftentimes people have experiences that they like to talk about, and it helps other people to hear from each other. Anyone have a thought or question?
I don't see anything in the chat, and
Yep, I don't either.
okay.
So if there are no questions, then I will just make sure that I get the handout. Unless, Amy, have you sent that to Brittany?
Nope, I could do it as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that you can forward along, and for
Sure.
those of you that are here today, it's something that you can then also share along with other people that perhaps are having the same interest, and we're not able to be here for this. I'm seeing that there is something here in the chat. My mother's dementia manifests in anxiety and paranoid expressions. I do not know how to respond to her when she is having an episode. Yes, this is coming in from Dennis and Ann. Not at all unusual for that to feel anxious and paranoid. One of the things we do, in addition, well, we know that trying to validate and reassure the person to the extent that you can, that whatever they're worrying about and feeling anxious about is not going to harm them, or is not really something they need to worry about. That can sometimes make a difference, and sometimes not. While there are very few treatments at this point that can really address dementia in the sense of how it progresses, there are things that people can take. It's not unusual for people to be depressed or anxious when they have cognitive decline. So there are medications that can help. I would talk to a medical professional to see whether there may be something that is appropriate that could help manage some of that anxiety and paranoia from a medical kind of way, because that is something that is very, very challenging, and we see this a lot. Anybody else have a thought or a question? Well, then thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Do know that the Alzheimer's Association has all of that resource that we talked about, alz.org. And I know that there are a few more of these programs planned, so you can stay connected to Brittany, and I'm sure she'll keep you posted around when and what we're offering that's coming up. And I will otherwise just wish you all the best with what you're dealing with, and I know that it's challenging. So keep learning and keep connected and get support.
Thank you, Anne. Brittany, do you have anything to say before we jump off?
No, other than I will just be emailing everyone the flyer or the handout that you'll be sending me, Amy. I'll email that out to everyone, as well as the recording and as well as a survey. So when you do get that in your email, if you could just kindly take a few minutes to fill that out, just lets our prisoners know how your experience was, and it also helps Redington plan future programs. And then if anyone has any questions about the program or our next class, just reach out.
Great.
The next I have on my schedule, I don't know if what you want me to share now, but I have the 18th is the next one. And that one actually is understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. So Dennis and Ann, that might be more specific to some of the behaviors that you're dealing with.
We talk about that anxiety. Yeah,
yeah.
we talk about that in that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, thanks everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.